Good morning, Wichita, and welcome to all of you present here this morning. We'll call this meeting to order. And with us today is Reverend Donna Goldtree of St. Paul's United Methodist Church to provide our invocation. Following that invocation, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance, and we ask if you can please stand for both.
If you'll please be in an attitude of graciousness. Holy One, how unique and wonderful are the many neighborhoods that weave together the fabric of Wichita. How unique and valued are the various commercial and industrial neighborhoods. Yes, sometimes, Lord, we forget to call them neighborhoods that support our community's well-being. Our council members, we are grateful they are elected from within these neighborhoods, both residential and commercial, and they listen to their voices. We are grateful. And our staff provides guidance to the council, also listening to the many and varied voices. And we thank you for the staff's wisdom. We give thanks also that the council and the staff are listening to the voices of the ones without a good place to live and have been providing new hope for them. Guide the city council today to continue helping this city to grow in a way where it is a vibrant place that is desired to be called home because of the ability of its citizens to live well, work well, and play well, and to rest. We give thanks for the council, and we give thanks for the important decisions that they will be guided to make today. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Reverend Goldtree. Madam Clerk, can you please call the first item?
Approve the minutes of the regular meeting of October 8th, 2024.
Do we have any changes or corrections? I see none. I move to approve the minutes for the regular meeting of October 8th, 2024.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Proclamations. Today's proclamations are Family Promise Week, Lights On After School, and Youth Action Month.
Can we please ask Family Promise of Greater Wichita to come forward at this time? Good morning to all of you. I thought I would read a quote from your director of USICH who said, "We end homelessness every day for thousands of people, but for every person housed, more lose their home. To make progress towards ending homelessness as we know it, we must close this revolving door and stop homelessness before it starts." So it is my pleasure to represent the City Council in reading the proclamation that reads, "The City of Wichita, Kansas, founded in 1870, whereas Family Promise of Greater Wichita began operations in October 2016, dedicated to help the most vulnerable among us, children and families who are facing homelessness and housing insecurity. Whereas Family Promise of Greater Wichita collaborates with community partners and donors to provide rental assistance to families to prevent homelessness, saving our community members from unnecessary trauma and our community as a whole from additional obligations and expenses. Whereas believing that every child deserves a home, Family Promise of Greater Wichita and its more than 1,000 volunteers empower families in their transition from homelessness to sustainable independence. Whereas the past 8 years, Family Promise of Greater Wichita has served more than 3,000 individuals including more than 2,000 children, on their path to safe, stable housing, and continues to expand its programs and serve more children and families every year. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Lily Wu, Mayor of the City of Wichita, Kansas, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim October 21st to 25th, 2024, as Family Promise Week in the City of Wichita, and encourage all to recognize and raise awareness of the issues facing homelessness in our community.
Hey, Randy, it's Mike Grube. How are you?
No.
Thank you, Mayor Wu and the City Council for helping us recognize and celebrate Family Promise Week in our community. We work daily to provide shelter for families with children who do not have a home. We work daily to help hundreds of families stay in the home that they're at. And we do this through a vast community of volunteers, faith congregations, and collaboration partners. And we just want to, next week, raise awareness on the issue of family homelessness. It is a growing and hidden sector in our community. So please follow us on Facebook and help us celebrate and figure out what you can do to help. Thank you so much for having us. Thanks.
May I please ask Wichita Public Schools USD 259 Stealth to please come forward at this time? The proclamation reads, the City of Wichita, Kansas, founded in 1870, whereas the City of Wichita stands firmly committed to quality after-school programs and opportunities to provide critical support for the academic growth and well-being of youth and offer enriching experiences that help young people learn and grow. Whereas the Wichita Public Schools Stealth after-school program has provided significant leadership in the area of community involvement in educating youth, grounded in the principle that quality after-school programs are key to helping children become successful adults. Whereas nearly 25 million families report that they would enroll their child in an after-school program if one was available. And for every child in a program, 4 are waiting to get in. Whereas many after-school programs across the country are facing operating challenges, forcing them to consider closing their doors and turning off their lights. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Lily Wu, Mayor of the City of Wichita, Kansas, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim October 24, 2024 as Lights On After School 2024 in the City of Wichita, and encourage all citizens to ensure that every child has access to a safe, engaging place where the lights are on after school and promote the importance of quality after-school programs.
Thank you, Mayor Wu and City Council members, for honoring our Stealth After School program with this proclamation. Stealth After School benefits more than 500 K-5 students in Wichita Public Schools. Many of these students are from disadvantaged backgrounds, yet they statistically perform better on state standards, they miss less school, and they have fewer behavior issues than their on-level peers due to their involvement in Stealth. Lights On After School is a night where we invite our families and community to celebrate the positive things happening after school, to show why it's so important that we keep the lights on for after-school programs. Stealth works, and it works thanks to our phenomenal teaching staff and through the support of so many great community partners like everyone in the council and Mayor Wu. Thank you again.
May I please ask Destination Innovation to please come forward at this time? Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. The proclamation reads, "The city of Wichita, Kansas, founded in 1870, whereas the youth of Kansas represent the bright future of our state and nation, holding the potential to lead with resilience, vision, and innovation. Whereas every young person, regardless of background, race, or circumstances, deserves the opportunity to grow, thrive, and reach their full potential. Kansas has taken the steps towards reforming its juvenile justice systems to reduce the reliance on detention and incarceration. Whereas a high amount of youth in Kansas, particularly youth of color and those with disabilities, face countless justice system issues threaten to derail their futures and exclude them from participating fully in society. Whereas during Youth Justice Action Month, we reaffirm our commitment to reimagining the way we serve and support young people across Kansas by advocating for a system that prioritizes rehabilitation, dignity, and justice for all. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Lily Wu, Mayor of the City of Wichita, Kansas, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim October 2024 as Youth Action Month in the City of Wichita and encourage all citizens to support activities and promote fairness, equality, and opportunity for every young person to feel valued and empowered."
Thank you, Mayor and the City of Wichita. My name is Desmond Bryan. I am the manager of Progeny Kansas, which is a program of Destination Innovation. Destination Innovation is a hub of youth enrichment that provides young people with the tools and resources to be successful, no matter the background. So we stand here today and we just want to invite the City of Wichita to support us in Youth Justice Action Month. So I have a question for you. What are you doing this month to support those that need the support the most? Last week, we went to JDF and really got to speak to some of the young people that we typically ignore. And I believe that all young people deserve leadership, all young people deserve education, and all young people deserve freedom. So we stand today in the gap of the young people that couldn't be here. And we would like to invite everybody out to our block party at the Atwater Center on Thursday, as well as our youth symposium next month on November 21st, where we'll be having 50 young people and 50 decision makers. So it's vital that our leaders show up in that space and let their voices be heard as we allow our youth to allow their voices to be authentically heard as well. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, please call the next.
Mayor, we have no one signed up to speak on the public agenda, so it is open.
We have 5 open positions for anyone who would like to speak. Would anyone from the audience like to address the City Council? I see none. We will bring it back to our clerk. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Consent agenda items 1 through 11.
Are there any items to be pulled for discussion?
Mayor, I would like to pull 3E.
3E. Any additional consent agenda items? I have 3A, 3C, and 4A. Three A, 3C, 3E, and 4A. Any other items? I see none. I move to approve consent agenda items without 3A, 3C, 3E, and 4A.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. We'll begin with 3A for consistencies. Regarding 3A, can we talk about the cost savings of proactive measures versus these reactive measures, and how much dredging would cost at Cheney Reservoir?
We sure can. Mayor, council members, Gary Jansen, Public Works and Utilities. This program's been in place since 1993. It's done a lot for protection, for watershed protection, for establishing of best management practices to limit sedimentation and phosphorus in particular from getting into the reservoir. What it also does too is it allows certain nutrients to stay in place by limiting that sedimentation, which helps save costs on treatment and energy for creating ozone, which is for taste and odor when those certain nutrients make it into the reservoir. Bottom line is we think over that period of time we've saved almost $7 million in what would be an equal amount of dredging had this program not been in place. Current budget for this through our production and pumping operating budget is $285,000 a year. So we think it's been a really good value. I will tell you real quick, I'll take this opportunity because this has been something that's been part of a lot of public conversations and folks asking during this drought why we're not considering dredging Cheney. There are 24 federal reservoirs across the state that provide 2/3 of the water to all Kansans. Of the 20 largest reservoirs, the most recent studies that were done to look at sedimentation, Cheney Reservoir was 3rd or 4th lowest in amount of sedimentation, so we're in a really good place. Right now, the estimate is somewhere between 3% and 5% of lost volume from sedimentation, which is pretty remarkable if you look at some of the others. Tuttle Creek Reservoir in Manhattan is currently well over 40% volume loss from sedimentation, which is starting to cause some real issues in that area. So we're in a great place. A lot of it can be owed to this program, and I think it's been helpful. It's been in place for such a long period of time. So dredging is extremely expensive and something we want to avoid getting to.
And I see that $90,000 will be for education and administration. Can you discuss the education piece?
That is through, a lot of that happens with the Cheney Lake Watershed Group that we are in partner with. They work especially with local farmers on agricultural practices that also help limit sedimentation into the reservoir.
And again, this would avoid the costly dredging that would be the worst case scenario.
It would. That's certainly an alternative, correct. And it's doing a lot for watershed protection and keeping that sediment where it needs to stay.
Mayor, I just wanted to mention that we have a very strong partnership with the farmers in the watershed, and previous councils have actually toured the area and met with farmers as well as those in charge of education. This council would like to do that. We'd be more than happy to set up a tour. They always want to cook lunch for you too, so they're a great group of people.
I know that I would.
I would also like that.
Several council members would be interested as well, so that could be a follow-up. Thank you very much. Consent agenda item 3C would be the next one. Can you please explain the history of why we have a local air quality program and Why is there a local match, in addition to how much is in the Environmental Health General Fund operating budget?
Sure. So this was established by the EPA and the Clean Air Act and has been in place since 1972. So this grant allows one full-time staff to help manage our air quality program for Wichita and Sedgwick County. That includes things like outreach and education, emissions tracking, modeling, reduction strategies, technical support on air quality conditions, forecasts, public safety, and any health issues related to air quality. This position is very important for maintaining positive relationships with KDHE and EPA. We work closely with the KDHE on air quality issues within the region. Some of our air quality can be owed to what comes from Oklahoma and Texas, but it's a reality of who we are. We still have to be cognizant of what's going on. This position manages a rebate program that's been highly successful this year with the rebate program. We ran out of money before the first month was even over. That rebate program focuses on replacing gas engine lawnmowers, weed eaters, any type of lawn equipment with electric equipment. It's been highly successful. That comes within our overall annual program. We've got some contingencies built in for this very reason because of the unknowns. The streets in particular happen to mostly be out east. Southeast Boulevard from Harry to Wassell, Lincoln, Woodlawn to Rock, Armour, Lincoln to Orem, Douglas, Oliver to Woodlawn, and Central I-135 to Hillside. So we see this quite often every year. I think we probably have some cost overruns, particularly on these composite type streets. But we're doing the right thing in the long term and fixing what we need to while we're there.
And the amount for that change order is?
It is, sorry, I lost that again, just under $600,000, $589,000.
And when would construction begin?
This work has already been completed. These quantities, until we get the asphalt taken off and we start doing the base repair work, all the base repair work has now been completed. This change order is to finalize what we call those final measured quantities of work. So all of it's already done. Thank you.
We will, Councilmember Hoheisel.
I thought you got away, huh, Gary? Could you
Almost.
list those streets again real quick, please?
Southeast Boulevard, Harry to Wassell, Lincoln, Woodlawn to Rock, Armour, Lincoln to Orem, Douglas, Oliver to Woodlawn, and Central 135 to Hillside.
Okay, yeah. In the subject up here on our green sheet, it doesn't list District 3, so just a note on that one. How much contingency is written into the OP3 for situations like this?
It kind of varies from year to year on what the program is projected to do. I don't have that number, but I could get that for you. Okay. We try to make sure that we get as much work done as we can without overloading that contingency. But by nature of the work and wanting to make sure we get everything done right in these locations that we're at, it makes a lot of sense to have that. I can let you know what that is, though. Yeah, and so when we get through with our contingency, any leftover money carries over to the next year, or do we try and spend it down on road repair? It can be a little bit of both, depending on what we've seen during that year. We have some things that come up. I can tell you from talking to all of you during the course of a year, we may have some things come up that were unexpected. And if we have that ability to, we can use some of that at that point in time. We'll also look at the next year's program. So there's not a perfect answer to that, but we try to balance that and not keep we're not trying to keep a lot of cash on hand or contingency. We want to be able to use that and get the work done. Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. I will move to approve consent agenda item 3A.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. I move to approve consent agenda item 3C.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Consent agenda item, I move to approve consent agenda item 3E.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. And I move to approve consent agenda item 4A.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? See none, Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Board of Bids and Contracts dated October 14th, 2024.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council, Josh Lauber, Department of Finance. The Board of Bids convened yesterday, October 14th, for the following items. For engineering, we have the stormwater drain number 521, improvements to serve Cottonwood Creek Estates addition for Allen's Excavating Incorporated in the amount of $503,791.86. We have the sanitary sewer improvements to serve Pegasus First and Second Edition for Noack Construction Company Incorporated in the amount of $1,317,028.95, subject to your approval of a new engineer estimate and budget authorization. We have the 2024 Outsourced Paving Preservation Program CIP Localized Street Repair for Conspec Incorporated, DBA Kansas Paving in the amount of $60,000 awarded underneath the engineer's estimate. We have for purchasing the root control herbicide rebid for Duke's Root Control Incorporated in the amount of $0.46294 per foot. And we have the aquarium cleaning and creek maintenance for Integrated Aquatic Management LLC in the amount of $23,795 per year for 3 years. We have the contract change order for our Pebble Quicklime bulk delivery contract for U.S. Lime Company St. Clair for a new amended price of $318.09 per ton. This is how to become a vendor with the city. And these are our open public opportunities out on the street today. And I'd be happy to try to answer your questions, and I recommend your approval.
Any questions for staff? I see none. I move to approve the Board of Bids and Contracts.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
K96 Improvement Project de minimis impact finding.
Good morning, Mayor, Council, Gary Jansen, Public Works and Utilities again. I promise I'm not trying to wear you out, but I do still have another item after this at some point. We talked about this a month ago, maybe, and I'll just cut right to it. So I think as all of you are aware, KDOT's been working on proposed improvements to K96 from 135 to 21st Street. As part of that, the design would have some impact on a few of the parks. K96 Fishing Lake area through there, Chisholm Creek Park, all that stuff in that same area. We have now heard from KDOT that they're not sure what their schedule is moving forward. So this came about at a time, and this is part of their formal process for the overall what they call environmental clearance, the NEPA process for the project, and to identify that there's minimal impact to these park properties and some of the mitigation process that happens with that. But because KDOT has now indicated they're not sure if and when the project's even moving forward, we've been waiting on additional information we have not received, including what happens with potential right-of-way acquisition, construction. We've got nothing to go off of. We are recommending the City Council just defer this item indefinitely. We not talk about any details today, and we'll just come back to it at a later date if and when we have more information from KDOT. We've been told that they will be scheduling a meeting soon with staff to discuss this more, which will include both Public Works and Park, but really we've got nothing else to discuss with you today. Our recommendation is to defer this item indefinitely.
Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for the information. I just wanted to kind of add on to that a little bit. As the chair of the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, I worked with you and Paul, and we asked KDOT to give a presentation or just an update last week, and they confirmed the same thing. In further conversations with KDOT, they have indicated to me, and I believe they have to you as well, that as soon as they have time frame or information available, they'll provide it. So I would be fully supportive based on what we learned last week at WAMPO and then conversations with KDOT of just deferring this until we know more, because I don't think we can make a good decision right now. So thank you for all your work on this.
I agree, thank you.
I don't see any questions for staff. Thank you. We'll open it up for public comment. I see no public comment. We'll bring it back to the bench. Jennifer.
Thank you. Parliamentary procedure-wise, may I make a suggestion that the motion be to table the item? And that does take it off the agenda indefinitely.
I motion to table this item indefinitely. Second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Public hearing and request for letter of intent for industrial revenue bonds, Market Center Apartments.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. I'm Tim Goodpasture with the City Manager's Office of Development Services. The item before you today is a request for a multifamily housing revenue bond letter of intent for Market Center Apartments. A Wichita OPCO LLC is a real estate holding entity that was created for the acquisition and renovation of 155 North Market, or the Market Center office building. They are requesting a letter of intent to issue multifamily housing revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $30 million. This aerial shows Douglas running from left to right along the bottom of the aerial and First Street roughly from left to right on the top of the aerial. The area outlined in red is 155 North Market, which is the southwest corner of Market Street and First Street in downtown Wichita. The project will be developed into 114 units for affordable housing. The project has already been awarded 4% low-income housing tax credits through the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation, which requires the use of tax-exempt bond financing. There will be no tax abatement granted as part of this project. The units will be studio, one-bedroom, and two-bedroom units. 20% of the units will be leased to tenants making 40% of the area median income, and 80% will be leased to tenants making 60% of the area median income. The project will include replacement of all of the windows, a new roof, brick tuck pointing on the exterior, a community room, a fitness center, a business center, a bike storage area, stainless steel appliance packages, granite countertops, and in-unit washer and dryers, among other improvements. The bonds will be placed privately with Sterling Bank. IRBs are a mechanism for achieving a sales tax exemption and/or a property tax abatement for companies or developments that are expanding and may be hiring new employees. The city is not lending any money and bears no risk. The company is required to achieve its own financing, which it has. There are no taxpayer dollars at risk. All of the costs associated with the issuance of bonds are borne by the company requesting the use of bonds. IRBs are utilized for a wide variety of industries, including for-profit companies, not-for-profit companies, universities, medical facilities, and affordable housing projects like this. Therefore, it is staff's recommendation that the City Council close the public hearing, adopt the resolution of intent, and authorize the necessary signatures. I believe the owner, David Roos, as well as Katie Luskowski, are on Teams, as well as a consultant, Mike Grube, for the owner, and they can answer any questions specific to the project, and I would be happy to stand for any questions as well.
Questions for staff, beginning with Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Tim, for the presentation. So 100% of these units are going to be for affordable housing.
Correct.
Okay, and it's from $659 to $1,041 rent.
That would be the monthly rents, correct.
That sounds awesome. How long do the low-income qualifications last? How long are they going to be beholden to?
Minimum of 15 years.
Minimum of 15 years. And since they qualified for the 4% low-income tax credits, can you remind us again what the oversight is that they are that they're going along with the program, they're doing what they need to do as far as the affordable rent there?
Sure. So they will be audited on an annual basis to verify that they are verifying the income of the individuals that are coming in to make sure that they are qualifying with the 60% or 40% of the area median income. And they will have to keep strict records on an ongoing basis to verify that all of the tenants qualify in that capacity and that the tenants don't for instance, get a new job that throws them out of the qualification where they're making more money than what the qualifying limits should be. So there's a very strict ongoing compliance that they have to go through in terms of auditing.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Glasscock.
Thank you, Mayor. So Councilman Hoheissel's last point. So let's say they increase their income, which is a great thing. Are they kicked out? Like, how long do they have to leave?
There will be some time frame within which they would have to relocate to somewhere else. It's not like that they would immediately be kicked out, but they would have a time frame within which, and I don't know that I could tell you exactly what that time frame is, but they would have a time frame within which they would have to relocate to a complex that was it was a market rate complex.
I'd be interested if we know the timeline. I would just hate if somebody's in the apartment, they get a new job, they have a month to leave, and then we create another problem where they may not be able to find another housing if it's outside of that. So for the 40% to 60% of the area median income, what is that quantifiably?
So for so it's one people, two people, three people. It's defined by family status. So I'll just give you one person. 60% of the area median income is $38,460, and 40% is $25,640.
Okay, thank you. I think that's more helpful to the public in terms of numbers instead of just percentages. You had said IRBs are for sales tax exemption or property tax exemptions. Which of the two are they looking for in this case?
So in this one, they are actually the primary driving force is the tax exempt bond financing that they are required to do with the 4% credits. So they can do that through the state at the Kansas Development Finance Authority, or they can do that through the city. We certainly prefer to do it, one, because we like to know who's doing business in our city, and we hope that they have a good experience and come back and do more business within the city. But then the second is they do get the sales tax exemption along with that as they are doing a bond issue. But there is no property tax abatement.
No property tax abatement,
Correct.
just the sales tax abatement for
Correct.
improvements? Okay. And then I think that probably answers my next question. See if I had anything else. When we, excuse me, when we talk about the 4% LIHTC credits, they've already been awarded the LIHTC credits. So in the application stage, they've already been awarded. How many applicants from Wichita have been awarded the 4% LIHTC credits?
So we had this summer, we had the 9% tax credits were approved, and we had one, the Timbers on East 21st near Oliver. We had, I believe for the 9% credits, I believe there were 4 projects from the city of Wichita that applied, and like I say, one received it. The 4% credits were, there was a second allocation. They do 9% credits once a year in July. The 4% credits they do twice a year, and they had a second round in late July due that have not yet been awarded.
Okay. And then last question I have, and this may be, so for them to receive the LIHTC credits, they have to receive the IRB from us, correct?
They have to do a tax exempt bond financing either through us or through the Kansas Development Finance Authority.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. I appreciate it.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Tim. I might have missed this, but are they also taking housing choice vouchers?
They will be required to accept anyone that has them. They are not necessarily actively pursuing that avenue, but if anyone shows up that has a voucher, they will be required to take them.
Awesome. Thank you.
Tim, again, just a clarifying question. So the developer is not asking for any property tax abatement. Can you just tell us how much property taxes this current building?
Yes, it's just over $40,000 a year. The 23 taxes were $40,000, $40,060.53.
Thank you, Tim. And you mentioned that the developer is on Teams right now. Good morning, David. Just wanted to ask the team of, I know that these are not from Wichita individuals, so can you tell us why you decided to invest in Wichita, Kansas to help us with affordable housing.
David, you're muted if you are speaking.
We'll come back for that answer. Councilmember Glasscock.
Yeah, my question was probably for David as well. I mean, I wanted to follow up to the question, if you move outside of the AMI, then what happens? Because I don't want people to get stuck where they don't feel like they can take advancement opportunities if they're in there. I just want that for a clerical question of how do we not just have people stuck in an apartment if they're, or stuck in a job if they're denying advancement opportunities to make more income because they don't want to move out of their apartment. How long does that process take? So if there's anybody that can answer that question, I would appreciate that.
So I will try to answer the question. Can you rephrase the question so I make sure I make?
So these apartments are 40 to 60% of the AMI.
Correct.
And so we were just told that if someone makes above that, then they have to find other living. And I just want to know what's that process? How long does that process? How long do they have? Because I don't want somebody to deny an advancement opportunity in a job or higher income because they also feel like they're stuck, and then they're, in this in-between period where they might be, 61% of the AMI, and so they're still close to low income. Well, now we just kick them out of their place. Now they have to get a moving truck to go to a different place, and then it may exacerbate a problem as well.
So I'll try to answer that two ways. Number one, as part of the qualification process, they have to provide income evidence, so on and so forth, right? So if a household makes more than those thresholds, right, depending on how many folks are in the household, there's that percentage of area median income. So in order to qualify for a lease, and a lease contract arrangement, they have to meet those qualifications. If they don't meet those qualifications, unfortunately, they won't qualify for housing at this location. If it's my understanding that once you qualify, you enter, generally speaking, a one-year lease, right? And so during that one-year lease, you continue to be allowed to be part of that one-year lease. If you're sort of renewing your lease or requesting to renew your lease.
I'm not sure if you guys can hear me. I
maybe
can't
we're
hear
getting
anything.
David, we can now hear you.
Having some technical
So
difficulties.
to add to my question, just to quantify
Apparently,
it, so
just so you know, he can't hear us, I think is part of the issue.
Gotcha.
Can someone email? Thank you.
So 60% of the average median income for a single adult would be $38,460. Let's say they received a raise from their company, and now they're making $38,560. So let's say they're only making $100 more than the average median income. They're still around this amount, but are we going to remove them from their home at that point for just being right above the average median income? And how long do they have to move out?
Yeah, so we might be able to get some, but generally speaking, it's my understanding that they enter into generally a one-year lease, and they're eligible to take advantage of those rents during that one-year lease. If for whatever reason they come up to renew their lease, they then have to sort of re-qualify. If at any point during the year they have to kind of continue to provide their income in order to qualify for that renewal. It's my understanding that no, they're not immediately evicted. They still have a lease agreement that they're entered into, but again, we'll get.
Okay, so we're speculating probably at the end of their lease.
Yes.
And I can, this is Mike Group, consultant for the developer. That is correct. Once they are initially qualified, if their income goes above the limits, they cannot be removed from the property. So it's the one time they have to meet it. If their income goes over that, then they can stay at the property.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I appreciate that clarification.
And Mike, anytime David is available, or you can answer the question why the developer chose to make an investment right here in Wichita.
Yeah. David, do you want to handle that one? David, can you hear?
I believe the problem is that David cannot hear us.
Okay. I'll try to, obviously, he's the owner of the property. They made the investment, I think his company, they do a lot of historic rehabs and urban redevelopment properties around the country. And they looked at Wichita as an opportunity to make another investment. The investment, they bought the building pre-COVID, and that kind of slowed everything down through that process. So, but I think it's just part of their business to redevelop properties in urban areas, especially that are historic.
Thank you, Mike. I see no further questions from the bench. We will now open it up for public comment. I see no one from the public who would like to speak. We will now bring it back to the bench. This resides in Vice Mayor Ballard's district.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very excited to learn that they were awarded the low-income tax credits. I know how competitive those can be. I'm also very excited that these seem to actually be affordable, which is something that we talk about all the time, is access to affordable housing. And I'm super excited that they are willing to renovate one of our historic buildings downtown. So I'd like to take staff to recommend action, close the public hearing, adopt the resolution of intent, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Adoption of the International Mechanical Code, International Fuel Gas Code, and International Residential Code 2024 edition.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. Chris Labor, Metro Area Building and Construction Department. We have 3 adoptions in front of you today. To begin with will be the 24 International Mechanical Code as stated. So this code is specifically Article 5 of our Unified Building and Trade Code. This will adopt the latest and an updated national code version as well as our local amendments. The mechanical code is specifically or generally applies to, I should say, the codes and standards for HVAC systems. This is an International Code Council code, so nests with the other ICC codes that we use. And then as you saw in your agenda items, unique to this one, we also do our International Fuel Gas Code adoption within the mechanical code. We do have some components with that in the plumbing code that you will also see later. But this is where we officially bring that on. And then just the way the ICC codes work, the International Residential Code has a lot of its components mixed with the trades codes as well. So when we do a trade code such as this, we bring components of the IRC in. You will see the full IRC adoption later, as that code in its entirety was not released at the same time as all of the rest. As we always like to point out, that this adoption was coordinated across the codes that we currently do have and that we currently are preparing to adopt. So you see those listed there. The latest adoption of this code was in December of 21. That had 9 local amendments. At this point, we're moving to the 2024 IMC version with 8 amendments. So some of the discussion with this includes the philosophical question of updating codes as they come out or waiting until those codes have had some time in the community. So our staff as well as our board members are looking at that, and we feel that the way these codes were actually released just over a year ago, prior to the 2024 year. So we feel like the way the national discussion, the way that adoption and those changes have been taking place, and then also that we see that that creates much less change to our industry when we adopt and keep up with those cycles. So we do feel and are recommending at this point that we go forward with adopting the codes towards the front end, even though we know that may mean some administrative changes within the next year or two as these are on the street. So in this code in particular, we saw very little change, especially to the local impact on our local processes. So the bulk of our changes you can see listed here, 6 of those 8 sections that remain in our local amendments, the only changes to those were numbering and references. 2 of those, again, just updating from 21 to 24 references. And some of that is based on, that's basically that the National Code Book changed what's in what chapter. So we have to obviously update that as well so it can be found and referenced. We did delete one of our amendments, as you saw, and that is a requirement for grease duct testing. We've had that locally for some time. The National Code now incorporates that test, so we no longer, of course, need it. No new items were added, and no amendments were added to our UBTC as part of this. So we have several long-standing, all of the amendments that are there have been long-standing. They've been in place for a good amount of time. As we always like to point out as well, the impact that the codes have, and specifically that there were no specific safety or management issues or any no local events or anything that needed to be accommodated in this code review. So obviously very happy to report that. And again, though I state relatively minimal here, the changes are actually very minimal. The process that was followed included the Board of Mechanical Appeals, as well as staff leading that review. It was then specifically coordinated and received input from these industry associations, which included the Kansas Cooling Contractors Association, the local Sheet Metal Workers Union, and the Wichita Area Builders Association. This was then, of course, taken to the Board of Sedgwick County Commissioners for public hearing. That occurred just last week. No members of the public commented on this code. We did have, for the 3 adoptions, we did have some industry members who were in attendance, but none of them spoke. So we did not receive any additional input there, and it did receive unanimous approval. As part of that, we did have individual meetings with each commissioner to go over the code changes and our adoption process in depth. There was one commissioner absent from the meeting. Commissioner Dennis is in Europe, but the other 4 were there and voted unanimously to approve. A few of the amendments that we wanted to ensure the public was made aware of are here. The first being, and all of these actually stand in favor of, I believe, the industry and making it a little easier for them to do their job. So previously, there were different charts, different rates for different size buildings for the ventilation rates and the calculations that are done. So those have been combined into one chart. So no matter how big the building is, you still follow the same chart, and this actually slightly reduces the restrictions on larger buildings. So there is a slight reduction in requirements here. Another, and similarly, so we see requirements for ventilation with adult changing stations, and this was specific to this code, but it's a good example of some of the things that we're starting to see when we get increased uses. So basically, if you have a changing station that requires a restroom, rest area type ventilation. So a lot of these changes just ensure that any of those new uses do get defined so that someone does not put those in place, not realizing that they have to follow those tenets of the code. So again, this is just to incorporate updated uses and new items. Another slight change that we saw was an allowance within ductwork. So previously, there was not an allowance to connect into common ductwork at all between dwelling units. That still is prohibited unless there is negative pressure, but if there is if that is a pressurized duct, that can be now allowed in order to, again, just provides another option for the industry, also with a component to ensure the safety factor is still there. On this, too, a few of our amendments that stand in place, again, the only changes were to update references, are that we do allow some increased length of ducting, and we allow, especially when we're talking dryer ducting and dryer venting, and some of those areas we do allow some additional footage of venting and ducting in our amendments. Another one, again, a fairly simple change, but code has previously prohibited pulling return air from a closet. There's obviously a lot of big closets out there. Hopefully most of the return air is coming from a closet that looks like this. Much will probably not, but again, if the closet is of enough size, that can now be pulled. And actually, Mr. Stoney Nethercott, our chief of the mechanical section, is here with his expertise if there's any questions, but Stoney specifically pointed out that he likes this because some of the humidity and issues that are sometimes found in closets. So this will hopefully assist with that. And then lastly, with a lot of the radiant tubing, heat tubing, the different things that go under floors and in different areas, it's hard to exactly calculate those in the initial drawings. So code specifically allows, which is something we have generally done by policy and allowed, kind of work this out on the job site, if you will. But code officially now says that you can adjust that up to 10% plus or minus without having to resubmit drawings or update the design, just again to accommodate those on-site changes when ducting or those, that tubing is laid and those circuit links are laid versus what was calculated in the engineering plans. So with that, we will of course stand for questions and public comment, after which we'll be recommending that council place on first reading the ordinance and amendments to Article 5 of the Unified Building and Trade Code with the adoption of the 2024 editions of the International Mechanical Code, International Fuel Gas Code, and the International Residential Code, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Questions for staff? I see none. Thank you. We will now open it up for public comment. I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. Given that Sedgwick County unanimously also voted for this and no objections from the major trades, I move to recommend to place on first reading the ordinance and amendments to Article 5 of the Unified Building and Trade Code with the adoption of the 2024 editions of the International Mechanical Code, the International Fuel Gas Code, and the International Residential Code, and authorize the necessary signatures. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Adoption of the International Existing Building Code 2024 edition and amendments.
All right, good morning again, Mayor and Council. Chris Labrum again, MABCD for the record. 2 of 3, and this one actually also a very easy adoption in that regard, very little change to what we already had in place. To clarify, because it is kind of interesting nomenclature, so the existing building code refers to existing buildings, not the existing code. I know sometimes that does confuse members of the public in what that is. So it's not referencing that the code was in existence, but that we're dealing with the remodel and renovation of buildings, as we will see here. This one was also presented for BOCC review and public hearing last week. You will also see that in our coordination slides. It impacts Article 2 of our UBTC, As with the others, it adopts the national code and the local amendments. And this is specifically the safety code for commercial remodel and renovation work. In general, this code reduces the overall requirements. So this allows, of course, in a change of use or a situation such as that, allows us to then match what is happening in the existing building with the new code, find those areas that need to be updated. It especially helps us with historical buildings and the requirements associated with those. So one thing, for example, that the IEBC allows is if a sprinkler system is installed in a historical building, then we're generally able to leave most of what is there and providing the historical significance untouched without any other issues. So again, we do see a lot of help there. It definitely helps our architecture and engineering community in their designs and in any kind of pre-design discussions that they have with us to make those work. Just as with our last code, coordinated across the codes that it has an impact with. It doesn't hit all of them or as many based on the nature of this code, but again, those that it does are listed there. Also the same usage, also happy to report that we've had no specific issues with this code that needed to be addressed in the adoption. Was last adopted in 20, that was the 2018 edition of the IBC. We had 71 local amendments. This will adopt the 24 IEBC with 85 amendments. Now, generally too, I of course am pleased to report when we reduce those versus increase those. So we were a little concerned to see that going the wrong direction, but that simply is based on a lot of additional references to the new baseline code. So we still do not specifically adopt elements of the energy code. We also have local ADA requirements. We'll also see in here that the City of Wichita requirements are slightly more restrictive than the national requirements. So based on that, we also have local floodplain regulations and references. Jurisdictions who do not have those would, of course, rely on what's in the national code to help guide them and help work those. When you have those, you either amend those pieces out or at least amend them to reference your local guidance. So we did see a large expansion in the national code, this one and to a lesser extent, but also in the next one you'll see the building code where the just that baseline code expanded a lot of reference and a lot of the areas where they incorporated energy, ADA, and floodplain management. So again, where we have those locally, we amend those out. In some cases, we just make a reference to our local guidance, but in most cases, those are taken out of the code, and those are the drivers for those increased amendments to the greatest extent. One that we didn't put on the slide but also drove the amendments up because it's mostly an international thing is parking garages. So there were some fire events in England and based on with electrical cars, and based on those, the code did incorporate a requirement for sprinkler systems in garages over 48,000 square feet, I believe it is. We did not see that as a good practice or a safety requirement, either one, so we have amended that out of our code, and I believe that's pretty consistent in most U.S. jurisdictions. So the process with this one did follow a little bit differently than what we normally do, given the size of the building code and then the IEBC that tacks onto that. We begin this one with a stakeholder committee. So this is a fairly robust committee. It actually consisted of 20 individuals, which included MABCD staff, Wichita Fire, Sedgwick County Fire, and then industry professionals from contractors to architects and engineers. After their work, we then took this to the Board of Code Standards and Appeals for their full review and input, after which we then, of course, did the same with the Wichita Area Builders Association, and then, as discussed, took this to the Board of Sedgwick County Commissioners and did receive their unanimous approval last week. So I think I've covered most of this. We'll add a few details to it, but again, majority of amendments increasing our manageability. Does include with these Public Works, Fire Code, other UBTC articles. When you get into these codes, you have plan review permits, plan review fees, a lot of the permitting fees, and those things are incorporated in these codes. So several of our amendments are simply to ensure those fit with all of the other agencies we're working with, our local fee charts, et cetera. And then as stated, removed energy references, referred to our local floodplain, and refer directly to the Americans with Disability Act, as well as the Wichita requirements for our work there. The main impact of this code, again, hits, that we see kind of hits our high-rise structures and helps us there, accommodates that nonconformance in that prior code, basically as explained previously. Also helps us with analysis and repair of damaged structures. Again, no real changes to these areas that we saw, so happy to be able to continue as is there. Didn't see any, again, a change in the application. So one that we will point out is a local allowance. The code, and has for some time, so this is a standing amendment that we've had, does require a firewall when there are separate electrical services. So code generally is going to say one electrical service for one building. Obviously, there are times when owners would want separate electrical services, and the code requires a firewall. This is in both our building codes. Firewalls are very extensive. They're designed to be a standalone structure, so the idea of a firewall is the building on either side could burn and fall over and the wall would still be in place. But we see that as extensive, not required in most cases, so we require a fire barrier in those, but we do not require a full firewall. And with that, we will also, just as before, happily stand for questions and encourage any public comment, after which it's recommended that council place on first reading the ordinance to amend Article 2, Section 3 of the Wichita-Sedgwick Unified Building and Trade Code and authorize the necessary signatures.
Thanks, Josh. Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, could you discuss the differences between a fire barrier and a firewall?
So a fire barrier does provide a level of fire protection, so a fire rating. It would be an extensive wall, but it would be allowed to be tied to the structure versus having to have its separate foundation and meet all of those requirements of a firewall.
Okay, and also go back to the, what you were talking about, the case that happened in England. Is that in regard to EV vehicle or EV?
That is exactly, sir, yes. And so in those cases, and those were EV vehicles that burned extensively, caused a lot of damage to cars next to them and to the garage. The problem we have with that is sprinklers do not necessarily put that fire out.
That does.
So they may protect from spread, but we think our firefighters are going to long be there by the time that would be the case, and we would probably just make it harder to get to the event by having sprinklers in place.
Right, you'd about have to bury the batteries to put them out in the EV vehicles. All right, well, I appreciate it. Thanks for the background.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Any further questions? I see none. Thank you, Chris. We'll open it back up to public comment. I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. I move to approve the first reading of the ordinance to amend Article 2, Section 3 of the Wichita-Sedgwick County Unified Building and Trade Code and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Adoption of the International Building Code 2024 edition and amendments.
All right, again, Mayor, council members, thank you. Last one, I promise. Chris Labram, MABCD, for the record. And again, International Building Code. Now this, luckily for you all, is not necessarily our biggest presentation because again, it was fairly minimal, but this is our heaviest lift and our biggest code that we do adopt. So as it governs commercial work. So same process that was here. This is also Article 2 of our Unified Building and Trade Code. It's Section 2. Also adopts National Code local amendments. And again, this covers all commercial construction, whether new, remodel, etc. This does also, again, of course, nest with our ICC family of codes and is compatible with the Uniform Plumbing Code, which is our one uniform code that we still utilize in this jurisdiction. Again, coordinated across the applicable codes. Also, same here in that we see generally minimal change, not a lot of impact to the industry. One that I will point out that we do think they'll be very pleased with, and we feel like we're still in the safety zone. So we'll get to that one, but with that exception, not much change. And we have, again, are happy to report we didn't have any specific safety or management issues to address in this adoption. Also was last done in January of 2020. That was the 18 International Building Code with 91 amendments. We have proposed the 2024 IBC with the 121 amendments. Just as described in the last adoption, we have those same items that are creating the majority of that increase in amendments, those that we're taking out of our out of the code here because we already have standing rules for those, and or so whether we reference our standard rules or remove them, it still ends up being a local change. Same process, that same 20-member committee reviewed this code, was then also taken to the BCSA, after which it was taken to WABA. One addition to this code is that the Office of the State Fire Marshal approves the overlap with the fire code. There are 2 chapters in this code that do overlap with the International Fire Code and that adoption. The Office of the State Fire Marshal agreed to review this prior to our local adoptions, which is something we have not been able to do in the past. So very grateful for that. That obviously sped us up quite a bit. Assuming we make no changes, we'll then obviously be able to publish and move forward with the code. We'll report back to them with this because the state does have an approval level of this code. And again, follow the same process of meetings with individual commissioners, followed by a public hearing at the county commission, and that was also approved unanimously. Just as you saw on the last code, the majority of our amendments for manageability and across the agencies and areas that we work with, and then again, won't rehash too much those changes in the 3 areas. So the change that I referenced earlier that we want to point out, so this is significant because state law requires that any commercial work that requires a permit must have architectural and or engineering designs associated with it. So when we require that permit, that state law kicks in, that obviously is an expense and a time burden. What we see, especially in the post-pandemic environment, is a lot of rearranging of offices, conference rooms, and those type of things, a lot of changes in the way businesses are structured. So in looking through that and reviewing that, previously we've allowed up to 100 square feet of work on wall covering and or non-load-bearing walls. We are increasing that to 250 square feet. So that will, by quite a bit, increase the amount of work that can be done, remodel work in a commercial building without having to come to us for a permit. There's obviously some exceptions to that. If there's utilities in that wall, if there's different things associated with it, obviously if it's load bearing, some of that we will still be requiring permits. But if it is simply rearranging and refinishing walls to that level, then that should give our industry a lot more room to do that without the burden of a full review and inspection process. Another example of some things where we do not require a permit is retaining walls. The code just says retaining walls need a permit. We say if you do a small retaining wall under 30 inches, there's some other criteria there. We don't need a permit. So those, again, not an extensive list, but a few of those that you see. Another local amendment that we have and have had for some time, didn't change this other than to make sure it's updated with the paragraph number, is that we allow fire separations in 3 and 4 family dwellings. So single family and 2 family do not require sprinklers, period. But 3 and 4 family are then kick us into the commercial code versus the residential code, which would start with saying sprinklers are required. So we just go ahead and amend that right out of the gate and say that you have the option for fire separations versus the sprinklers in order to avoid that. And then, as I've stated a few times now, we have some areas of enhanced ADA accommodations that apply to the city of Wichita. One amendment that we have had in place and that is standing is aircraft hangars. We allow a slightly larger aircraft hangar than code requirement without sprinklers, and we allow some reduced spacing requirements in those as a support to the local aviation industry. And again, over time and practices analysis, this is where we feel we're still well safe without being overly burdensome to their requirements and work. Here's another example, hotel and church canopies, which we see a lot. You see an example there. Baseline code says that anything you hang off of your building has to be the same fire rating as the building. We think that's a little again, overburdensome, so we do not require that. You still have to have a fire rating on those canopies, but it does not have to meet the same criteria as the building. So there's some reduced requirements in that area that we have. Another one, and there is a slight change to this at this time in our code. So restaurants, and restaurants have a little bit tighter sprinkler requirements than most other commercial buildings, such as mercantile, retail, et cetera, where you're not cooking, you don't have a seated customers, don't have quite the same hazards. So code, baseline code 100 or less does not require sprinklers. In the baseline code from 100 and above requires sprinklers. We amend that to say between 100 and 299. You can avoid the sprinklers if you're able to provide a third exit and a manual fire alarm. Now, there has been some split in this previously. Wichita's fire code has previously and often allowed that to be an or, a third exit or a manual fire alarm. The fire code is changing and is being updated to state that the third exit and a manual fire alarm are required. So we did incorporate that in our code. Obviously, if that's changed as the fire code goes forward, we would make that adjustment and bring that back to you all. But for now, that is an and. So that will have some potential impact in a renovation from an existing building to a restaurant. But generally, and again, this is there's always the option to put sprinklers in, and this is an option to still try to avoid that while maintaining those safety factors. So, and then Fire Marshal Dugan obviously has some options within the distance between those exits, et cetera. So there's some work the fire department can do to help people with those, and again, to try to avoid those fire sprinkler requirements when they seek to do so. Last one here, and so I guess that's a little bit back, but I've got pretty good picture of Gary's water treatment plant out there as an example of special inspections. So an MABCD inspection for something like this, we're going to go out in advance of all of that concrete being poured and make sure that the holes that are dug are clean, that they're the right type of, it's the right type of trench as per the plans requirements, the engineering requirements, right size of rebar, right amount of rebar. We're going to look, make sure conditions are correct for that concrete to be poured. As that concrete is being put in place, we are not inspecting that. There's a third party working for the contractor doing that work, and they're the ones that are checking temperature, humidity, checking the consistency of that concrete, checking every so often to ensure there are not voids or anything that is going to create a problem with that in the future. Those reports are then provided to us and are attached to our inspection reports and the permit. So in these cases, we up the size of the buildings that require those special inspections. There may still be some special use buildings that those requirements kick in regardless. Some companies have special inspectors with their work and do those no matter what. But in this case, if you're under 50,000 square feet, then you do not require special inspections. Over that, you do. And again, that is slightly less restrictive than what the national code requires. We've upped the square footage. And with that, we will again happily stand for questions and welcome any public comment, and after which it is recommended that council place on first reading the ordinance to amend Article 2, Section 3 of the Wichita-Sedgwick Unified Building and Trade Code and authorize the necessary signatures.
Thank you again, Chris. We'll start with Councilmember Glasscock.
Thank you, Mayor. Quick question about canopies, less about the fire retention of canopies, but I know there's a couple small businesses in Delano in particular that have asked me about canopy regulations and that they have to pay a yearly fee for canopy inspection. To their knowledge, the canopy's never been inspected. Do we have a canopy inspection fee? How often do we monitor canopies?
So that would not be with us, Councilman. So I'm going to venture a guess that that's probably a right-of-way use fee or something along those lines. Once we have inspected it and granted occupancy, then the only time we would get involved again is if there was damage to the canopy or a report of some form of danger involved, and then it would either be us and fire.
So they don't pay a yearly fee to you, it might be a right-of-way?
Correct.
Okay.
So I would have to look to
I'll
see
look into that later.
who else that might be.
If it's not yours, then don't worry about it. I'll figure it out later. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I see no further questions for staff. We'll open it up for public comment. I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. I move to place on first reading the ordinance to amend Article 2, Section 2 of the Wichita-Sedgwick County Unified Building and Trade Code and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Mayor.
Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
2025 Cultural Funding Allocation Recommendations.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Lindsay Banaka, Director of Arts and Cultural Services for the City Manager's Office. This is one of my favorite presentations to give each year because it's our opportunity to really highlight the incredible work that's happening in our nonprofit sector that we are so honored to help support. A little bit of background, the city's had a cultural funding program that provides operational funding support to local arts and cultural organizations and also to individual artists. The program is overseen by our Cultural Funding Committee, which is made up of 11 members. 7 are appointed by all of you, and 4 are appointed by our nonprofit partner, the Arts Council. The committee makes funding recommendations to you all for local artists and arts and cultural organizations, which is why we're here today. They oversee the funding program and make sure that it aligns with our cultural arts strategic plan, and I'll talk about it shortly, but just an upfront reminder that we adopted a new strategic plan in May of this year, so we did see a few changes in the funding program. And the grant cycle is administered annually, and applications are new and competitive each year. I always want to reiterate this because the funding program does have a lot of variables. So while we have applicants that have received funding in this program for upwards of 20 years, it really is a fresh, competitive process each and every year. One of the big variables is that our committee members change and the amount of applications that we receive into the program change year to year. This year we had a significant growth in applicants that we received. So while many organizations receive funding each year through this program, it really is a new competitive process each year. We have 3 categories for 2025 funding this year with one significant change. The operational grants, which we'll talk about at length today, the artist access grants, which we'll talk about a little bit, but we'll have applications open up later this year. And the new fund that we have this year that we're really excited about is the Arts Thrive Grant. This is not city money, but because we have a robust funding program, we were eligible to be a sub-grantor of the National Endowments Fund. So we received a $75,000 grant from the NEA that we're then sub-granting into the community. At the guidance of the Cultural Funding Committee, we really built this program to be a risk capital program. So for the Arts Thrive call to applicants, it was pitch this idea that serves the community through arts and culture, and let's see how we can fulfill that need. And I'm really excited to say we had over 40 applicants for 3 grants through that program. But we're here to talk about operational grants, so I'll keep it moving. As a reminder, our strategic plan was adopted this May, and our mission is to ensure that everyone has equitable access to cultural arts opportunities by activating the creative potential of our community. And our vision is that Wichita is recognized as a community where artistic expression is an integral part of the city's success, where arts thrive, and where cultural heritage is preserved and celebrated. And these are really our guiding posts for the Cultural Funding Committee to make sure that whatever was funded through this program was really in lockstep alignment with this plan, and a special consideration was for those organizations that really align with both this mission and vision. Quickly about Artist Access. This is a longtime grant program that we've had that's for individual artists who serve Wichita residents. We'll be opening up applications in November of this year, and they should close into this year or early January of next year. Those applications will be on our grant portal, wichita.submittable.com or wichita.gov/arts. We'll be sure to send out some PR about that once it is opened. And this grant is specifically designed to support professional development opportunities for individual artists. So it's not to fund the creation of new art, but to really advance the professional careers of artists working in Wichita. So funding examples could include, but are not limited to, attending a conference, a training, website development, an artist residency, or professional services. I always like to highlight like a legal aid opportunity that this grant could provide. So if an artist is looking to copyright their work or work with some sort of legal support to figure out how to secure and safeguard their artwork, this is a great opportunity for that grant. Artist access grants are $1,000 or less, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but the committee has designated a pot of money to be set aside for artist access grants for next year. So it'll be part of the funding recommendation today, but the applications themselves will come back to you once the committee has reviewed applications and has a recommendation for funding. So we are recommending a pot of money be set aside, but we don't know who will be receiving those funds just yet. So into the operational grant eligibility. So this is not the full exhaustive list, but kind of just an overview of what type of organization can apply. Most notably that they must be a 501c3 nonprofit, and their primary purpose must be the production, presentation, advancement, or preservation of arts and culture in the community. And then they must serve the residents of the city of Wichita. They also must have a minimum of 2 years of operational history of serving residents in Wichita. And then of note, this does not include our cultural institutions. They receive dedicated funding support, so they do not compete in the funding program. So I have them listed out here. There's many that we have in our cultural institution category. Most notably, they're ones that we own and operate or that reside within a city building. But these organizations would not be eligible for this program. The grant application itself, we changed it up a little bit this year, not majorly, but we really wanted to make sure it connected with our new strategic plan. The committee identified 3 objectives within our new plan that we really thought could be of service in this grant program. The first objective is to really increase the number of participants who are historically underserved and ensure that they have access to arts and cultural opportunities. And that is really objective 1.1 that's most tied to our mission statement. Objective 3.3 is establish Wichita as a regional hub for cultural arts. Objective 4.1 is to partner with organizations to increase the number of paid professional opportunities for artists and organizations in the community. And this is one that the committee felt very strongly about and really encouraged all applicants and recognized that most of our applicants are doing great jobs partnering across the community, but where there might be duplicative services, we've got a lot of music organizations. The committee would love to see those music organizations partner together to really advance the field. Most of them do, but we'd just love to see more. The application components include narrative questions, attendance and impact data, board and staff information, and financial information. We ask for a lot of information as part of this grant. The timeline, we opened applications in June. I do want to point out that we had several open engagement opportunities for prospective applicants to meet with staff and committee members to talk about how they could have a successful application. Many took us up on that offer. A shout out to our Cultural Arts Administrator, Jesse Koza, who oversees and administers this program. I can hear him on his phone all day, every day, guiding applicants on to make sure that they have the right components for their application in, but we're really thankful that the community is taking us up on that offer. Applications were open for a couple months. We also have something that's unique to our program. On September 19th, we hold a Q&A, so it's an opportunity for the committee itself to meet with the applicants and for them to ask any questions or clarify any information. We know that putting art on a piece of paper is not always easy to understand the ins and outs of what an organization does, so that Q&A is really important to help myth bust anything on an application or just provide clarifying information. And then moving right along, we're here today to seek City Council approval, and then we go into contracting. We have annual reports, we have site visits. We're engaged with these applicants and organizations really throughout the year. And of note, I just want to highlight the incredible work that the committee does. They're all volunteers. I think on the low end, one committee member said that they spent 8 hours reviewing applications for this fund. Most of them said they are more in the 20 to 25 hours just in reviewing the applications themselves. That's not including meeting time, so we're really grateful. We try to make sure we give them lots of snacks and keep them excited to come back because they're doing a lot of really detailed work in reviewing these applications. In looking at the funding itself, we're projected to have $510,000 in this program for 2025. This is advised by our finance department. We do see a small increase on it year to year, just depending on the mill levy, but we're anticipating $510,000 being available in 2025. We don't find out that number until mid-November to know the exact amount we're working with. Of which, for the sake of this program, the committee is recommending $495,000 to be allocated for operational grants, and then the $15,000 be set aside or reserved for artist access applicants. And then this next section is kind of confusing once you see who gets what money or who's being recommended what, but the amount an applicant is eligible to ask for, it is a request, is depending on the size of their operational budget. So the larger organizations who have annual operating budgets of $500,000 and more are eligible to ask up to 8% of their total operating budget, not to exceed $75,000. So I point this out because sometimes when you see the scoring of the point structure of which applicant received what point, it's not always the highest scoring applicant that receives the most amount of money. And then the opposite is also true. The lowest scoring might not receive the lowest grant because it really is determined by the eligible ask and then what they actually ask. Not all organizations ask for the max. Actually, I would say about half of them do. Some of them have like specific assets based on their operating budget, and there's a lot of reasons why they do that. I thought that this would be interesting to look at because we've seen a significant growth in this program over the last few years, which I would really just highlight for some strategic community engagement that we've done throughout this strategic planning process. We really were pinpointing what organizations are working in this field and do they know that they have this opportunity through the city. So for this next fiscal year, for this funding cycle, we had 39 applicants, which is up almost double from 2 years ago. The funding request, this is the actual ask that we received, not the cap of the eligible ask, but just what we saw in request was over $1 million this year. And then the applicant operating budget total, so we asked them that as part of their application process, but our nonprofit arts and culture sector who've applied into this program have over $36 million in annual operating budgets, and we're only giving out about about $500,000. So we're just kind of a blip in the overall market that's happening in the community. And then also we released this economic prosperity study earlier this year. If you remember, Randy Cohen from Americans for the Arts was here talking about the economic impact that the nonprofit arts and culture sector has in Wichita. Of note, in 2022, when the study concluded, we were about $185 million economic impact for the nonprofit arts sector. So I bring that up because we're potentially awarding $500,000 in grants to nonprofits. That return on investment is pretty exciting when we look at the overall economic impact that this sector has in the community. So the recommendations. The cultural funding recommends awarding grants to 38 applicants and reserving the Artist Access Fund, $495,000 for operational grants, $15,000 to the Artist Access Grants Fund. These are the large organizations with operational budgets of $500,000 or more. These are the medium organizations with operating budgets between $250,000 to $499,999. And then these are the small organizations with operating budgets of under $250,000. And of note, we had many first-time applicants in this category specifically. And then new to this year's program, and not something that we would normally do, but the committee recognized several organizations who are really just doing above and beyond work that aligns really strategically with our new strategic plan and with our mission of representing and serving historically underserved and culturally diverse populations. all of the applicants and all the funding recipients this year do that work, but these are the organizations that really stood out with exemplary applications. And I just want to highlight a few that maybe the public isn't super aware of. They're smaller organizations, but the work that they do is really incredible. So just to shout out Juniper Arts Academy. This is a relatively new organization in the community, but they provide fine arts education to youth in foster care and the juvenile justice system. And they're really providing a stopgap for individuals and young people who would have otherwise no access to arts education. Laughing Feet Performers inspires relationships between individuals with special needs and their typical peers through musical and artistic expression, and they give performance opportunities to those who would not normally have the opportunity to do so. Music Youth Partnership provides music and character development classes to at-risk youth in public schools, and specifically they find opportunities to give individuals, to give youth instruments that they would not otherwise have access to. So they're giving instruments that will then belong to the students, but then they're also giving them education on how to play those instruments. And I could spend all day talking about all these organizations, but I'll spare you the rest, but encourage everyone to look up these organizations to learn more about what they do in the community. And with that, the recommendation is to approve the 2025 funding allocations for arts and cultural organizations by the Cultural Funding Committee and authorize the necessary signatures. And then I would like to point out that our chairperson for the committee, Dominic Ghana, is in the audience if you would have any questions for him as well. And with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Lindsay, and thank you, Dom. We'll begin with Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Hey, Lindsay, thank you for all your work on this. We are reaching out to the groups who have been denied, just to let them know what they can do to strengthen their application for next year.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Glasscock.
Thank you. That was one of my questions as well. I was trying to read through all the feedback on here. The feedback for us, I think, is great on here, but in terms of the actual applicant, are we providing more information than just the funding recommendation feedback that we get?
I'm not sure which packet you're looking at, but a series of bullet points under each application. That is what they automatically receive. If they want to have additional feedback, we'll definitely provide it. Of note, the one applicant that was not recommended for funding, we will reach out to them specifically. They received funding this past year. They didn't this year. That organization is going through some transition. So we recognize, and the committee recognize, the great work that they do in the community, but really was just looking for more of a thorough application. They provided all the required information, but it was a very limited application. So it's not to discredit the work that they're doing, but we really want to encourage them to have a more successful application in the future. So we will provide that feedback.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Lindsay, how much was allocated last year for cultural funding?
So for last year, this current fiscal year that we're in about $472,000 through the operational grant fund.
I had a couple more questions. I wanted to know, you mentioned the Arts Thrive call. When will those be announced?
That's a good question.
Applicants?
Yeah, so we will bring that to this body for approval once we get through them. We received quite a few more than we anticipated, and we're trying not to burn out our committee at the same time while they review it. We hope to have them reviewed within the next 30 days and get them to you for approval. That funding is for 2025, and the earliest funding could be exhausted would be end of January. So we are getting closer, but we do have some time. But we're really thrilled with the amount of applications, and now we're wondering, like, where do we find more money? Because so many of the projects were great ideas.
And you mentioned the Professional Career Development Fund, the Artist Access Grant. When will those applications begin, and will there be a robust communication to artists?
Yeah, we anticipate them opening, I'm nervous to say on live mic, but I think November 7th. Jesse's telling me November 8th is when we anticipate them opening on Submittable, and we always try to make sure that all past applicants know about it, and we kind of have a big contact list, but we'll send out a press release. We will have information sessions so individuals can reach out to us and learn more about the program as well.
Out of full disclosure, I was a past president of the Wichita Asian Association, and the nonprofit has 0 paid staff members. It's completely volunteers. And one of the things that was daunting was the application itself. And so I really appreciate seeing organizations that are much smaller, like Raíces de mi Tierra, that also were outreach to and asked to apply. So thank you for the outreach to the smaller organizations that are making an impact. I see no further questions for staff. We'll open it up for public comment.
Good morning. My name's Greg Bishop. I'm current president of the Wichita Jazz Festival, and I really appreciate all the work of the committee, their support in helping us prepare our application, the extra sessions that they provided for everyone. That was really, it was pretty fabulous. Just something about the Wichita Jazz Festival. We are all volunteer organization, and we will be celebrating our 53rd year in the spring. We try to bring in jazz artists that are world-class musicians and also educators, and so we help to put those people out into the schools also to provide clinics, and we have people that work in schools throughout the year to try to help with education about jazz. So it's really a wonderful experience, and this money will go to help cover our administrative costs for the festival. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andre Seward, Programming Director for Tallgrass Film Festival, which is operated by Tallgrass Film Association.
I'm Melanie Addington, Executive Director of Tallgrass Film Association.
And I'm Sierra Franklin Morton. I'm the Assistant Director for Tallgrass Film Association.
I just want to say thank you for considering this funding. Tallgrass Film Festival is very important to me personally. I started volunteering when I was 15 at Wichita East High. I now live in Berlin, Germany, but come back every year to participate in the festival. But it's amazing to see just how much this event brings to the city, especially seeing people from all over the world come to the festival, learn about Wichita, and return, either making films or just returning to the festival. It's also nice to be able to bring the films to underrepresented communities in Wichita. Especially, I'm very proud of bringing more Spanish language films to the community, so they get to see stories in their language on the big screen. There's lots of other things we do, but it's an amazing cultural institution here.
And I wanted to mention the festival is next week, our 22nd. So we encourage everyone to attend. I especially encourage you to come out Wednesday to our free Wizard of Oz NAFSCR Park screening. I know our mayor will be joining us along with Music Theater Wichita. This is a very large organization done on a very medium budget with 2.5 full-time staff. We bring hundreds and hundreds of people from all over the country to visit. We have international visitors. I believe we're actually much better recognized nationally than maybe necessarily here in Wichita, but because of funding through the city of Wichita, it actually does help us continue. So thank you.
And then just to kind of wrap up, just a little bit of an overview on the festival. We do have a couple of great things that we have, including Hope in the Heartland, which is going to be partially sponsored by the city of Wichita. Hope you guys come out and see that. Also, I'm really excited for the showing of I Needed Paris, which is a documentary feature showcasing the students at Gordon Parks Academy that got to go to Paris and go through the streets that Gordon Parks got to go to and take photography of, and we actually invited the students of Gordon Parks Academy to come and see themselves on screen, which will be a very big, impactful moment for their lives.
And sorry, one last thing. We want to thank the city also for supporting. We are bringing Kevin John Goff, the great nephew of Hattie McDaniel. Her family has never returned to Wichita for all of this time, and you all are providing a key to the city, and they're very excited. And he's actually looking to make this his second home to make the documentary about her life. So thank you for making that happen. Thank you very much.
I'm Kathy Grant with Music Youth Partnership. I'm the executive director. I am just thank you so much for the privilege of this funding, for the important work that all of these nonprofits do. We are only 2.5 years old. We started in one school. We're in USD 259 schools, and just a support to the band directors who do so much. We started, like I said, 2.5 years ago in one school. As this year, we are in 6 schools and growing. We intend to be in every school. So what we do is we hand instruments to kids that struggle to get them any other way. I had the opportunity in May to go myself and hand 7 instruments to students who had to turn their instruments in, not thinking that they would never touch an instrument again, that instrument again. They were going into high school and had to relinquish their instruments. The band director called me. I brought the instruments right over, and every one of those kids, just tears filled their eyes. We're talking about 8th graders. So it was very moving. I cried all the way home. So we are our mentors. We pay mentors to go into these schools, middle schools and high schools, and the high school that middle school feeds into, so that our mentors will be with those kids the maximum amount of time. And then after they graduate from high school, we plan to provide scholarships for kids to go to college. We're working close partnership with Butler County Community College, which wants to welcome those kids into their schools. Many, maybe most of those kids never had a family member that went to college, so it will be foreign to those people. Music Youth Partnership, with the scholarships that the schools provide, we want to provide scholarships that will pay their living expenses because they'll have to get there. And so I just thank you so much for the privilege. I always say that we're not in this to build musicians. We're in this for kids to see the beauty and disciplines of music education and what that can do for their lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy.
Good morning. I am Colleen, Director of Development for PBS Kansas.
Good morning. I'm Lynn Wolf, Director of Education for PBS Kansas.
And we just wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity to be able to apply for this grant and to be able to continue to fund what our city looks for in being able to provide the services and programming for our kids, for our adults, for the different events that we can provide for you guys. So we just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Denise Sherman, the Executive Director, the Kansas African American Museum. Thank you so very much for the support and the funding that you afford us as we continue to move forward with our programming, our operations, and being a part of the central location here in the downtown area. This is so very important for us because we're at a critical time when making a move to do something bigger and grander than what we've done before takes a lot of effort, energy, and a lot of support. So this crucial time for us is so appreciated that you are seeing that we are a part of not only the core of the city, but the advancement of the city. We appreciate the fact that you recognize the artistic, the historic, the educational, and the cultural components of what we do. And so as we continue to expand and move forward, we just want you to know that it is so very important that we stay in front of you and that you continue to work with us. And as our previous executive director, Melanie, who spoke from Tallgrass, it's the opportunity also to collaborate with other organizations within our same area, because the Hattie McDaniel's part of our story too. And so when we have an opportunity to collaborate and partner and look for ways to expand our collective and our intersecting messages, it only makes it greater. So thank you again, and I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. Oh, there's one more.
Hi, my name is Amanda Alessi. I'm the director of the Great Plains Nature Center. For those of you
that aren't aware, the Nature Center is a partnership. So I'm with the City of Wichita Park and Recreation. We also have U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, and a nonprofit, the Friends of the Great Plains Nature Center, who have very gratefully been recipients of this cultural funding. And I just wanted to point out the Councilmember Glasscock's question about the comments and the feedback. So we've benefited from this grant process, not just financially, but through that feedback, and not just for the next application, but the nonprofit as a whole. That feedback has made us stronger. When we've taken those recommendations from the committee, it has built our nonprofit and to a stronger, more healthy nonprofit. And that's benefited us with other grant applications and other things that we've done. So I just wanted to thank the committee and let you know the great work that they're doing and how that's benefited the community. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers. Really appreciate it. We will close public comment and bring it back to the bench. Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. It'll be very challenging for me to not make comments regarding this, but due to a personal conflict of interest, I must abstain from this vote. Thank you.
I am really proud to move this item forward. I really appreciated Lindsay's feedback regarding the financials. This is an investment into nonprofit organizations that are doing great work. We're a small piece of the funding that you all need, and hearing you all talk about collaboration and further advancement together, I think is how you harness the dollars to a greater amount. And so I really appreciate the efforts by staff in trying to educate community about the funding mechanism so that it is equitable and that people have access and know how the process works. As a council, we get lots of requests to fund youth programs, even youth groups that want to do whatever you may think. And the reality is there are only limited dollars and we have to be good stewards. And there are application processes for a reason. And so we appreciate the Cultural Arts Funding Board as well as the staff in helping share that information with community so that they can apply and then be successful candidates to get this funding. That really just helps kickstart how other community members can also help support. So thank you to the staff and to the volunteers of the committee and to all the organizations that are really moving Wichita forward, and we appreciate it as a whole council. So thank you for your heartfelt messages. It is these types of intentional investments that make me very proud to be on this council with these council members. So I move to approve the funding allocations recommended for arts and cultural organizations by the Cultural Funding Committee and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 6-1 abstention. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Real-time Information Center flock purchase.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Captain Aaron Moses, the Executive Officer of the Wichita Police Department, here today to discuss a request for authorization to move forward with additional flock license plate readers and additional gunshot detection technology. I always like to start with this. This is how we started all of our town hall meetings in your council districts to discuss why we're having this conversation. I know everybody in this room is very familiar with this grid. It's something we took to heart in the police department, identifying that crime prevention was a lower quality, higher importance issue for our community. Real-time information centers, gunshot detection technology, and automated license plate readers help us to move that crime prevention aspect to higher quality, higher importance, which is where we obviously want to see that be for our community. Some background on how we got to where we are. On November 7th, 2023, the Wichita City Council approved receipt of the 2023 COPS Technology and Equipment Program Invitational Solicitation Grant and the 2023 Bureau of Justice Assistance National Public Safety Partnership Grant. Those grants totaled an amount of $2.15 million. And the purpose of those grants was to implement a real-time information center in the city of Wichita. One of the items we're asking for authorization to purchase with those funds is additional Flock automated license plate reader cameras. We began as one of the earlier adopters of Flock technology in law enforcement in November of 2020. Since we have started installing those devices in our community, we have recovered at least $5.4 million in stolen property, and those cameras have led to clearances of multiple violent crimes, including some homicides. Some of the details on how the cameras work: they take photographs only, and those photographs are purged after 30 days unless they're used in an investigation. Additionally, I will add, we've strengthened some of our language in the agreements we have with Flock after some community concern to make it very clear that Flock does not own these photographs, and they cannot retain them after that 30-day period either, or sell them. As far as gunshot detection, we started beta testing gunshot detection in our city with Flock Raven, is what it's called, in 2022. That was based on a 5-year look back of gun crime data, and the hot spots that we identified were in Council District 1 and Council District 3. Based on that testing period, the alerts that have been generated off of the gunshot detection software and 911 calls and reports, we've identified an 83% underreporting of gunshots to police in those areas. That can be for any myriad of reasons. People don't want to call 911. People don't want to be identified as calling 911. A lot of times we see that people believe that someone else is calling 911, so they don't feel that they need to. What we heard through our town halls that we had is the desire to have police respond when people hear gunshots in their community. That makes sense. We can't respond if we're not being notified that they're happening. So this is a way to deal with that 83% of underreporting in the test areas, because we anticipate that that's also occurring in other parts of our community as well. One reason we wanted to move forward with the beta test first was to really evaluate the reliability of this technology before we move forward with a purchase using grant funds or city funds. And this is a direct notification system. There is no third party involved. Sometimes you'll hear of gunshot detection systems where sound is captured, that sound is sent off to a person somewhere else to evaluate and determine whether these are gunshots, and then make a notification to 911. The way that this system works, it integrates with our Flock automated license plate reader cameras, and there's a direct notification to officers in the field who are logged into the system that say, we identified gunshots at this location based on triangulation of three separate sensors that hear those gunshots. To enhance the real-time information center that we're moving forward with, we seek again to expand the Flock Safety Falcon, that's the automated license plate readers, to add an additional 31 license plate reader devices. 10 of those devices are purchased under a 5-year agreement to reduce cost, and then an additional 21 devices are purchased under a 2-year agreement. Those are lumped in with the gunshot detection sensors. And there is a 20% discount based on existing infrastructure that we already have. We currently have 2 square miles of gunshot detection coverage in District 1 and District 3. What we're seeking to do is expand that to add 2 additional square miles and cover a hotspot area identified in District 6 based on that 5-year gun crime data. Just the financial consideration, the first 10 Flock safety license plate readers, it's a cost of $151,500. That's the upfront cost for the 5 years, and that's utilizing the grant funds. After that 5 years, a funding source would have to be identified if the system is to be continued. And then for the 21 license plate readers and the expansion of the gunshot detection coverage, it's $186,150. That again includes a $20,000 discount based on existing infrastructure. And at the end of year 2, the ongoing costs are estimated at $183,000, which would require identification of a funding source. Again, for public engagement, as we started this real-time information center discussion over a year ago, if not before that, it was made very clear to us that community engagement and public engagement was very important. We took that to heart. We had town hall meetings arranged at each of the city council districts. Those occurred this summer into the fall, with the last one being Council District 2 in September. We facilitated discussion with residents about real-time information centers and about gunshot detection specifically. The feedback about the gunshot detection software was mostly positive. There were some privacy concerns, which we took note of as we moved towards policy development. But mostly it was positive, saying, when can you turn it on? We want this in our community, we want this turned on, and we want you to be able to respond to the information it's providing you. We do intend to continue public engagement throughout the policy development process related to gunshot detection. Just legal consideration, City Code Section 2.64 provides for sole source procurement when items are only available from one firm and when purchasing elsewhere would be economically impractical. Obviously, we are heavily invested in the flock infrastructure at this point with over 160 cameras in our community currently. So utilizing the flock ALPRs makes sense to expand on that investment. And the fact that the gunshot detection software interfaces with the current notification process that officers use for the automated license plate readers. The Law Department has also reviewed and approved the 2021 agreement for flock, and the additional purchase would be added to that agreement. The recommended action is that City Council approve the contracts with flock, safety, and authorize the necessary signatures. Just some additional background on real-time information centers. One study from the Journal of Criminal Justice showed that real-time information centers lead to an increase in clearance rates for violent crime of 5%, for property crime of 12%, and overall an increase of 11%. And just to give you some data on where we're at today, the most recent statistics that I got from our crime analyst section yesterday show a decrease in drive-by shootings over the 5-year average of 12%, a decrease in aggravated assault and aggravated battery with firearms where they are discharged of 5% over the 5-year average. But we have seen a increase in the past 28-day period, a relatively significant increase, and we believe technology like this would help us address that increase in our community. As far as the Real-Time Information Center itself, the RFP results for the construction of the physical Real-Time Information Center were brought to you, I believe, in August at the evening meeting when you discussed the budget. The Constant Technology was selected to do the construction, and we are currently in the RFP process for the actual operating system of the Real-Time Information Center. And another reason we are moving forward with Flock is the interaction that software will have with Flock technology. So I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Captain Moses. Questions for staff, beginning with Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Captain. I appreciate all the work. This has been pretty well received in my district, except they are wondering if the gunshot detection can capture illegal fireworks. So,
yes, so not necessarily illegal fireworks, but one thing we saw when the beta test period started was an identification of fireworks. This technology uses machine learning, not necessarily AI, but machine learning, and we're able to provide it feedback and say, no, that was fireworks. We've confirmed that sound that you heard and thought was gunshots was fireworks. And it will then learn and say, okay, I'm not going to notify on that sound in the future. But no, illegal fireworks would not be something that the gunshot detection software would notify us about.
Okay, yeah. Well, they'll be disappointed on that one.
I'm aware.
Is there any federal oversight of the Flock company that you're aware of?
What do you mean by federal oversight?
I mean, there's a lot of privacy concerns, justifiably so with the community. So is there anybody that's looking into their practices that can essentially audit every once in a while and make sure that they're following through with their end of the contract?
I am not sure if there's federal oversight of Flock. I'll make a note to follow up on that. But obviously, the Constitution of the United States would be certainly a lot of federal oversight about how this system can be used. And the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution protects every citizen against unreasonable search and seizure. And we intend to incorporate a lot of protections for the community and guardrails, guidelines on how this system should be used into our policy. And that's why we want to continue public engagement through the policy development process.
Yeah, and you guys are doing a good job as far as the oversight on our end. It's just the concerns with the bigger company that we don't necessarily have the power to dig into. And on that note, who deletes? Is it Flock? They have the information as far as the pictures that are taken of the license plate, so they're the ones who are responsible for deleting the pictures?
Yeah, they're automatically purged after 30 days unless they're used in an investigation. But like I said, we actually strengthened our MOU. We worked with the law department to do that a few months ago as we were working through these discussions to strengthen that MOU to make it very clear. Flock does not own these photographs. Flock cannot sell these photographs. Flock cannot do anything with the photographs. To be honest with you, they don't have an interest in that. And the Flock CEO has visited here to Wichita himself and made that very clear.
Okay. Last question. We talk about the need for continuing funding going forward. Are there grants out there that we feel pretty confident we can apply for that would help with the continuing funding, or have there been other sources identified that we might dig into for that funding?
We haven't identified the sources at this point, but yes, we're always looking at grant information in order to encompass some of these ongoing costs. Technology is a high grant item in our world. There's always grants out there for emerging technology. So that's certainly something that we would continue to evaluate moving forward.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Vice Mayor Ballard.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for the presentation. So how much more coverage will this provide?
So the beta test area is currently 2 square miles, split between District 1 and District 3. We are seeking to, we haven't paid for that 2 square miles because we've been a beta test partner with Flock. So they came in, they installed the actual physical equipment and let us have access to it. Officers have not been responding to it, but we've been using the information we've been using the system to verify the accuracy of the information for Flock. What we're going to do is we're going to purchase that 2 square miles and then add an additional 2 square miles on top of that. Does that make sense?
So, kind of.
4 square miles total in the city is what we're seeking to have.
So the 337,000 will cover 4 square miles, not 2.
It will cover 4 plus 21 Flock automated license plate readers. So those are bundled together in the cost breakdown.
Okay. Because that was I've only received questions from one person, and they were concerned about spending $337,000 for 2 square miles, but that's not the whole story.
No, it's.
I just want to make sure that we understand.
Yes, everything we're talking about today is actually 31 additional automated license plate reader cameras, what we currently have, and then 4 square miles of gunshot detection. And those are separate devices. So the gunshot detection devices are actually completely separate from the automated license plate readers. They are separate physical devices.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Captain. Just wanted to say I appreciate the presentation and information, and it was pretty eye-opening at the town hall, looking at the effectiveness of the gunshot detection and seeing that the system had triangulated down and found some shells and people hadn't called in. And it's really a serious issue for people to hear gunshots and not call. And so many people think somebody else did. So I'm supportive of this. I appreciate the presentation, and seeing how the license plate readers have worked has been pretty amazing, and how it's helped out with law enforcement. So I'm supportive, and just wanted to say thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. I'm going to pile on a little bit, Captain. Thank you for your presentation. Mike, as always, steals my questions. Yesterday I was driving down Kellogg, and at Kellogg and Webb, I saw a billboard for the Save a Casing program, so I wanted to applaud y'all for doing that. And it really made me think, we have the violent interrupters, we have Save a Casing, we have this. There's so many great things that you're doing, just working in conjunction, and it's 21st century policing. I always say I like cops on the ground, but I also like to utilize the tools that we have. You provided fantastic data, and I always appreciate that. As our good friend Andy Cohen from the American for the Arts says, all data should have stories, and all stories should have data. I know some of the stories that the Flock camera system has been successful in really saving people's lives. Could you share just one or two?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a great tool for us on reported abductions. So when officers are responding to the area of perhaps a reported abduction in a certain area of the community, our officers can go in and search the cameras in that area to identify a vehicle. And that's led to rapid recovery of juveniles, whether it be a stranger abduction or a familial abduction. Those are the ones that really jump out to me. Additionally, it's helped in cases of homicides where there really is no information, and we're able to piece everything together with the automated license plate readers to bring justice to victims. And I appreciate you talking about 21st century policing. One thing I wanted to touch on was how this fits into Chief Sullivan's vision for the police department and the 3 goals that he set out for us, which are to increase community engagement, to reduce violent crime, and to leverage technology. And truthfully, a real-time information center fits into all 3 of those. It's going to allow us to push out information to the public. It's going to allow us to hopefully have an impact on violent crime rates, and it's certainly going to allow us to leverage technology.
Thank you, Captain. You nailed it.
Thanks.
Councilmember Glasscock.
Thank you, Mayor. So we're reviewing the financial considerations. I noticed that the shot detection component costs beginning in year 2 are estimated to be $180,000 annually. It said that we would identify later if they would be continued. I imagine that'll probably just come out of the police budget. Is that next year is pretty quick. So we're already getting ready to go into budget conversations at the start of the year. So have you identified where the shot detection will continue?
We have not identified that today, and I just want to clarify that $183,000 is not just the gunshot detection. So that's gunshot detection and 21 automated license plate readers. So we certainly have the opportunity, if in a year we want to reduce that cost, we can take off the automated license plate readers and keep the gunshot detection. We can look at what that does to cost. There are certainly options. We wanted to make sure that we had, what we call off-ramps here, that looking at the city's financial situation and the benefit of the system, we know that there's going to be some tough decisions moving forward. So we wanted to give ourselves the flexibility to make those decisions. But just to be clear, the $183,000 is for both 21 of the automated license plate readers and 4 square miles of gunshot detection.
So 21 of them. So what is the 5-year continuation then?
That is 10 automated license plate readers. So we separated them to reduce costs up front, and those 10 license plate readers, it allowed us to have a reduced cost on those 10 if we spread that out over 5 years.
Okay, fantastic. In terms of the 31 total flock devices, do we have a map where individuals can see where these flock cameras are located as well?
We don't. We don't publicize exactly where we put these cameras out of a concern of people damaging them. We have had people damage these cameras, and certainly we want to protect the investment that our community is making. What we do is we look at crime in our community, high traffic areas near those areas of crime, and deploy them based on data.
I know you briefly hit on this too. We've seen abuse of some flock in other communities. Can you talk about the mitigating factors to make sure that's not going to happen here in Wichita?
Absolutely. We have a strong policy that Flock has actually started to talk to other agencies about regarding our policy on auditing and our policy on requirements for the system. So Flock requires, or our policy requirement for our officers is in order to search the system, you have to use a case number. That allows us on the back end in an audit to ensure that officers are accessing the system as they're supposed to. And we also recognize that there are going to be situations like a child abduction or something that's happening right now where there may not be a case number assigned to that incident yet. And so the direction in our policy is that officers have to write a general location that they're responding and what type of call they're responding to. The bottom line is we verify that our officers are using the system in response or in an investigation into a specific incident. What we've also done is we've had discussions with Flock about expanding essentially positive acknowledgement to other communities that may have access to our Flock license plate reader data to say that they will have similar policies in place and they will also conduct audits of their officers' use of the system.
Okay. Last question I have. Total Flock cameras, how many do we have in the city right now?
160-ish.
Is that public and private, or is that just what we have?
I believe that's both.
Okay. Do you know how many of those would be private?
I don't, but I can get that answer for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. Captain, how long has Flock Company been in business?
I know we started with them in 2020, November of 2020, and we were one of the early adopters of the license plate readers back then.
Okay. What other cities are they in?
Pretty much everywhere. So they're expanding their presence in Atlanta, Georgia. They're in Texas. They are the leading company as far as automated license plate readers go.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
I see no further questions for staff. Thank you, Captain Moses. We will now open it up for public comment.
I understand the value, Doug Ballard, I live in Riverside. I understand the value of it as a tool, but I have a couple questions. Number one, what's the lifespan of the equipment? Okay. And my other question is, once you start down the whole sole source is always a concern of mine. I understand the value of it and all that, but once you start down a path when you're only using one company, will another company ever be able to bid on this kind of work? Yeah.
As far as the lifespan on the equipment, I don't have the actual range of lifespan, but I do know that Flock works very closely with us to make repairs to equipment when we need to. That's been pretty limited, other than people damaging the cameras. What we have seen, ironically, is these automated license plate readers are actually powered by solar. And so in the winter, we have some challenges when it's cloudy that will have cameras fall offline because they're not getting solar power. So that's been one of our challenges, but obviously when it's a sunny day, it powers right back up. As far as the sole source is concerned, we appreciate that concern, and we actually do have multiple different vendors of license plate readers that we have used in Wichita. Another vendor I know of that we currently use and have used in the past is LSAG. It's just a different functionality. Additionally, we're currently testing what's called Axon Fleet, which is an Axon product. It's a dash camera that also functions as an automated license plate reader. And I see Josh Laubers behind me to hopefully answer that question a little more thoroughly than I did.
Morning. Still morning. Morning, Mayor, Council, Josh Lauber, Department of Finance. Sole sourcing is very important in procurement. In City Code 2.64, there are specific buckets that are outlined that the governing body can use in a procurement policy. And the procurement policy in this instance is sole source. When you approve this item, you're outlining the terms and conditions you're approving, and that includes the years. So once the years expire, we can come back to you for a new authorization. As a part of our board and bids and contracts presentation, you will see the ordinance in question, and that's the item that will be exempted from competitive procurement.
Any further public comment? I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench.
I'd like to take staff's recommended action, approve the contracts for flock safety, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Temporary operations at Wichita Waterworks.
Good morning, Mayor and Council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works and Utilities. The item before you this morning is consideration of a contract for temporary operations support at Wichita Waterworks. As you're all aware, we have reached substantial completion of the facility. Had a great event week before last. All of you that are able to be there, I'm glad you could be there. We are now moving into a phase where operations have become the critical focal point, and so we've got to have staff to be able to do that. So right now, between now and March, April of 2025, we've got performance testing going on. What we talked about before is commissioning and startup. That's hydraulic flow and chemical test, process performance testing, with a goal of final completion in April of 2025. So we've got training and intermittent operations during that period of time. We've got training underway now with the staff that we have. Again, shooting for full-time operations in April. Keeping in mind, too, that our existing water treatment plant will stay in operations during that same period of time, probably through all of 2025. We need the ability to work this new plant, make sure it's been tested in all seasons, demands, source water blend scenarios. So we're estimating right now, probably from April through the end of 2025, operating both plants, which means we need more staff to be able to do that. So this is the same plan we've been working on for some time. We talked about this a little bit in July with the approval of the contract for OTS, that depending on our recruiting efforts, we may need additional support for making the transition in operations. So 20 new positions were added to operate the new plant. That included plant manager, supervisor, process control specialist, and overall operations and maintenance. We've done a pretty good job in every area except for process control specialists. There's some factors associated with that I'll talk about in just a moment. The PCS positions require Class 4 water operator certification and prior experience operating a water treatment plant. So again, we filled most of the others. We're struggling because there's some issues related to these positions across the country that's presented some additional challenges. So what we've done with recruitment efforts since February has been really robust. Staff's done a great job. We've had a lot of people, all hands-on. Communications department's been involved with this. We've had some staff specifically dedicated to this, but just to kind of run through this list and talk about some of the things we've done, and then I'll talk about some of the other challenges that are currently in the market related to this industry. With the council support and collaboration with SEIU, we were able to increase pay rates by about 40%. Still not probably where we would like to be compared to where the industry is, but that did help. We have a competency-based matrix, if you will, for compensation of these employees, which allows them, if they want to get additional training certifications to help enhance, basically create their own incentives for additional pay. We had a recruitment contract. Actually, we've had several of those temporary labor requests through Syndio, industry job boards. We've also had job fairs and same-day interviews at the treatment plant, direct emails to employees at other Kansas utilities and through Kansas Municipal Utility Organizations, social media, candidate sourcing, and targeted posts on LinkedIn, working closely with human resources. This effort is going to continue regardless of your action today, and we're going to try to add some additional incentives working with HR on hiring bonuses and relocation bonuses to see if we can get more folks hired in the meantime. So for these positions in particular, we've had 3 qualified applications, 2 offers were made, 1 successful hire, which is not where we had hoped to be, but it certainly wasn't for lack of effort. So I'll tell you too, across the nation, there is a shortage of treatment plant operators for a variety of reasons. We've seen reports from the American Water Works Association, from the EPA. We talk about the silver tsunami in a lot of industries. There's a lot of folks that have been retiring, and there's not near as many younger people coming up through. One of the things that we have really stepped up on through this process and will continue to do is make sure what we can do for outreach and education, whether that's starting in high schools, trade schools. Everybody understands what these positions are and that they are out there. It's pretty cool stuff, working with technology. Even if we're not meeting current market compensation and benefits through the city, we think are good. But because there's such a shortage across the country, it makes it even more challenging to meet those pay standards and to get folks to move from where they might be at. So I saw some recent stories again, working with other agencies too. We're not the only ones that are struggling with this. The city of Arc City recently had some challenges on a cybersecurity attack. They've got to run all their operations manually. They're trying to hire operators too. Not sure how that's going, but there's a need out there, and so we're going to keep moving forward. We're going to keep up the effort. We're going to try to offer some additional incentives, but in the meantime, we really need to move forward with additional help and support by way of this contract. One more thing I'll say about this too is I think everybody knows this is 24/7, 365 days a year, right? We've got to operate this plant. It's around the clock. That has also become a challenge, I think, for the newer generation. Not everybody wants to work those shifts necessarily, so that's been the hard part too. We've talked to some folks who I think had been more interested if we could have promised them a first shift position, but that's just not possible. So that's been one of our challenges that we've faced too. So I mentioned that the City Council approved a contract with OTS in July of this year for technical support, including development of standard operating procedures, maintenance programs, and risk management plans. That work is underway now, moving forward with our staff being engaged. The contract did not include hands-on operations. We did talk about the possibility of having to come back to this point depending on the success of our recruiting efforts. I mentioned this before, and I'll mention this again. We continued recruiting efforts while negotiating terms of this supplemental contract, and we will continue to do so. So for the contract itself, some of the initial terms is OTS will provide certified water plant operators, again, full-time, 24/7 availability, with a necessary level of prior experience. At the point in time where we are at now, needing to bring the plant online in April, we've got to find experienced operators. That's one of the benefits that they can bring to this. Over the course of time, we've promoted our staff, which is good. We've brought others in that didn't have the necessary experience at the time, but we had the flexibility to train them, right? It could take over several years. We don't have the time to do that now, unfortunately. They're insured against liability by OTS, and they have the ability to provide substitute operators as needed whenever there may be absences, which brings a real value to this. The good part about this is the contract can be canceled in whole or in part within 60 days notice if city's hiring efforts are successful. So we will continue our recruiting efforts. If we bring folks on, that will take off part of their contract and hopefully save us money long term. OTS is certified with the city as an emerging business enterprise. And I want to mention again, operation of both plants will continue during this time and remain under control of the city. So even the operational support that they will be bringing in will be under the direction of our supervisors, our managers, to make sure that we have a smooth transition as we go through this process. So on the financial considerations for the contract is a one-year contract with the option to renew for one additional year. The total cost is not to exceed $1,285,000 per year. The city will continue recruiting to fill all positions, and as I mentioned, the contractor level of effort and contract cost will decrease as positions are filled. Funding is available within the existing adopted operating budget. I might mention what's in the box there. So we did have funding programmed within our operating budget with the hopes of hiring the staff ourselves. So the net cost increase for this contract is just under $800,000. With that, staff recommends City Council approve the professional services contract with OTS, approve any budget adjustments, and authorize the necessary signatures, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Gary. We'll begin with Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Gary. Can you go back to that last slide? Okay, so that 491 number there, 491,000, that's not the unfilled positions that we have now. Is that the savings from the unfilled positions, or is that something we already had a lot?
That's the funding, that's the budget we had programmed to fill these positions if we were going to hire them ourselves.
Okay, how many positions are we short right now?
We ideally, we're hoping to hire 5 to 6 more operators.
Okay, about what are the average salaries of the 5 to 6 positions?
So right now, our average salary, and I can give you an hourly rate for certified water operators, is around $32 to $39 an hour. And I'm glad you asked that, because one of the things I wanted to mention across the industry, what we've looked at, even with that increase to get to that point, utilities our size are typically paying up to $50 an hour.
Okay. And none of the workers from the plant we have up and running right now, are any of those going to be eligible to come across this and do this? Do any of them qualify? Or?
They will, all of the above. We're going to need more operators when this new plant comes online. So even with increases in technology and efficiencies, there's a lot of new things that are happening here. We need to make sure that we stay on operations and maintenance from the very beginning. We've got a lot that we've got to mitigate here from a risk standpoint. So we're going to need more operators at our new plant than we do at the old plant. we're going to work all of them in between, right? So what will happen is if we move forward with this contract, bring in qualified operators, they will help train. We'll have people moving back and forth between the current plant and the new plant to get everybody trained up, hopefully to take the old plant offline by the end of 2025 and have everybody there at the new plant at that point. Any of the operations support that OTS would provide in the meantime, if they're still part of the process, they would no longer be there after the end of next year.
Okay. I have, and a side note, I guess, or side question. That group that's looking at what to do with the old plant, have they met yet? Where are we in that process?
So actually, we're going to be discussing that with council at the workshop next Tuesday.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks, Gary.
Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. Gary, we've approved some more money for positions. We approved 6 more months warranty, and now this. Do you foresee any more requests for additional funds to get the plant up and going?
We have, so one thing I'd mentioned last time I was here in front of you for the change orders, we've got one last item in particular as we come into the final months here related to the converting the existing raw water line to finished water line. So there were some costs associated with that were actually part of change order number 2. And at the time, and it's also included in that change order, we said we'd have to come back to the council for final costs. We're working through details with KDHE on that now. That's a fairly unique situation. We knew early on that that's what was going to happen to convert that, but didn't know what the requirements would be, depending on the condition of the pipe, what we saw there. So we're staff's working with KDHE now. In fact, we're supposed to have some more information on pricing in the following week. But that's one thing that I know that we'll have to come back before the council. I don't know what that cost looks like yet, but there could be some other things to wrap this up once we get through April. That's the one thing I know of. Otherwise, I'm not aware of any at this time.
How much is left in the budget that could pay for those costs?
So we have, and I can give you an exact number if I can get back to you on that, but I know within the capital side of it for the capital investments, which would be the item I was just talking about, there still is funding available. What we're looking at today comes out of our operating budget, which was put in place as part of our rate structure, knowing that we're going to have to operate both of these plants through some period of time.
Last question is, what happens to the employees at the old plant when you close the old plant? They lose their jobs, or
We'll
they
be
be
moving
absorbed
everybody.
into?
We'll be moving everybody to the new plant. Again, this new plant is going to take more staff than what we've got now. I'll just tell you that we've been running leaner than we wanted to for some time. That's not necessarily out of choice. That's because we were struggling to hire people even then at different times. As we had staff who knew the old plant, who knew how it operated, we were able to make that work more so. With people working a little bit longer shifts, having knowledge of the facility makes a big difference. With this plant being brand new technology and a lot to learn, we're going to need more people. So no one's losing their job. Everybody's moving up there. During this transition period is when we'll be doing training with staff. But it's critical to make sure that we've got operators to keep the plants going first and foremost. Well, I'll tell you what will happen at some point in time. What we're hoping for is if we've got the ability, this same thing that we're talking about here now is going to need to happen with our B&R project here in several years. We're going to need additional staff. We're going to need staff with different training and qualifications. I think it's very practical that if we have the capacity that some of the staff that we're bringing on now, once we get the water treatment plant going and feel comfortable with where we're at, some of those staff may be able to transition to help us with bringing B&R online.
Thank you.
Gary, can you talk about some of the requirements that are needed to become an operator so that folks can start thinking about this being a career choice?
I might defer to staff. I've got 2 of them here that can probably talk better than me about this, Dawn or Laura, if you want to. Because I want to give you a better answer than I would be able to give you.
Don Henry, Public Works and Utilities. The standard requirement for a licensed water treatment plant operator in Kansas is a high school education and then 2 years experience working in a water treatment facility. And then during that 2 years, there's also an education and training period to qualify for testing. and then ultimately to work in the city's plan, it requires what's called a Class 4 certification. So it's that high school education, 2 years training in a plant, and then passing the exam for the Class 4.
Thank you. I see no further questions for staff. We'll open it up for public comment. I see no one from the public. We'll bring it back to the bench. Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you to all your staff. A shout out to Laura Quick. Thank you. I know you've been working extremely hard on this, been creative, you've been diligent, and I appreciate that. Just on an interesting note, and I mentioned this at my district advisory board meeting last night because the drought in the water treatment plant came up. In 2019, when I was doing my onboarding and going to meet with each department, I asked each department 4 questions. I asked them lots of questions, but 4 consistent questions. And one of the questions that I asked was, other than more budget, what do you need? And I remember clearly Public Works in 2019 saying, we need more staff. We're seeing a trend of people not going into these industries. And so, this now having this amazing opportunity of having a water treatment plant is just exasperating that. So I appreciate all of your efforts, your hard work. I think you've exhausted every opportunity that you can that brought us to this solution. And we have to get this right. This is the largest piece of infrastructure our city has ever seen. I think it's going to be an amazing project, something that we'll be proud of for the next 100 years. So I'm going to be very supportive of this today. Thank you.
I will echo the same message Councilmember Tuttle has mentioned, and that is I'm really trying to encourage a lot more young people to consider options outside of going to a 4-year university, and that there are really great paying opportunities for careers. And thank you for the requisites that are necessary to become an operator. Like you mentioned, high school graduate, 2 years experience in a plant, and qualify for testing are really the requirements to become an operator. And right now we're hiring 5 to 6 operators. And they will eventually get paid between $32 to $39 an hour. These are great paying jobs. And so I just wanted to mention that, again, more people need to be interested in these types of critical roles for infrastructure. And anytime I'm able to highlight that it's a great opportunity with very small barriers, that we should be emphasizing these opportunities to the community. So thank you for sharing all that information. So I will motion to approve the contract with OTS, approve any required budget adjustments, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
CON 2024-35, amendment to CON 2012-44 to increase square footage of a restaurant generally located on the northeast corner of East Douglas Avenue and North Oliver Avenue, 4800 East Douglas Avenue.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council members. Philip Zevenbergen with the Planning Department, here to present on behalf of Scott Wadle. The application before you is actually coming back to City Council. You guys considered this first on August 13th, and your motion then was to send it back to the Planning Commission for further consideration. That meeting took place on September 12th, and here we are today. As a reminder, the applicant is requesting this amendment to an existing conditional use on the property in order to increase the square footage of an existing restaurant. After the City Council considered this in August, and before the Planning Commission reconsidered the item, the applicant did amend the request. The original request was to increase the square footage, but also to remove the prohibition against outdoor speakers and outdoor TVs on their patio. So that was the original request. The request that was considered by the Planning Commission was just to increase the size of the restaurant. They actually removed their request to allow for outdoor speakers and outdoor TVs, which, if you remember, were one of the major sticking points with public comment around the area, with the concern of the nuisance factor of noise in the neighborhood and issues related to that. Also, as a reminder, this item is before you today. The original request had different DAB and MAPC considerations. Again, most of that was related to the ability to have outdoor speakers and TVs. But more importantly, the application was protested, and we'll get to that in a second, did exceed the 20% consideration. So there are some vote considerations for you today as a reminder. The applicant had an existing restaurant, and there was a connected retail space on this property. And when that retail space became available, they did a zone change to allow for a microbrewery. That was approved. And now they're looking to expand into that space, and it also includes some additional restaurant seating, which is why we're here today. The conditional use originally limited the size of the restaurant, which had, in terms of square footage, which of course impacts the seating, and so they're looking to increase that. The site is located at 4800 East Douglas Avenue, which you can see on your screen. It's at the northeast corner of Douglas and Oliver. It consists of 3 parcels. It's 0.17 acres in size and has 3 different zoning classifications of general commercial, neighborhood retail, and B multifamily. The conditional use is primarily related to the B multifamily, which is for ancillary parking, but the ancillary parking had specific conditions on it related to the size of the restaurant. The subject site is currently developed as a retail building and the commercial building and the associated parking. The context around this area, the properties to the north are zoned general office and B multifamily and developed with an office and a single family residence respectively. Property to the east is zoned limited commercial and is developed with a bank. Property to the south across Douglas is zoned limited commercial and developed with stores and a restaurant. And property to the west across Oliver is zoned limited commercial and developed with a strip mall. The staff report provides information about noise and limitations, as well as the existing conditional use and the zoning on the site. In terms of review, the Planning Commission originally considered this request on June 27th, and at that meeting, they deferred it to the July 11th meeting. On July 11th, they recommended approval with a vote of 7-4 with 1 abstention. Again, this original request included the ability to have outdoor speakers and TVs. On July 1st, the District Advisory Board for District 1 considered the request. They recommended approval with a 5-2 vote with 1 abstention. They approved the expansion of the restaurant and allowing outdoor speakers, but did not allow outdoor televisions, which deferred from the original Planning Commission recommendation. As I said before, the City Council first considered this item on August 13th, and the motion was to send there was an original motion to approve, but that failed, and so the second motion was to send the case back to Planning Commission, which was approved 7-0. On September 12th, the Planning Commission reviewed the applicant's revised request, and that was only to increase the size of the restaurant and remove the request to permit outdoor speakers and TVs. And the MAPC recommended approval with an 11-0 vote. As a reminder, this case was protested. Here is the zoomed in version of the protest map. The protest equaled 29% of the eligible properties, which does exceed the 20% that's set by state statute. Therefore, in order to approve this request, the council must have a supermajority vote, which requires 6 out of 7 council members. It is recommended that the City Council adopt the findings of the MAPC, approve the requested amendment, authorize the necessary signatures, and instruct the city clerk to publish the resolution after approval. And again, this requires 6 of 7 votes. Alternatives include override the MAPC, adopt alternative findings, and deny the conditional use request, which can be done with 5 of 7 votes, or you can return it to MAPC for additional consideration, which requires 4 of 7 votes. And in terms of process, as a reminder, the City Council policy is that public hearing for the planning agenda occurs at the Planning Commission, and according to the policy, the City Council does not typically receive public comments on zoning items. And with that, I can stand for any questions.
Questions for staff, beginning with Vice Mayor Ballard.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Philip. Just a quick question. The protest is for when they were wanting the TVs and speakers and everything, correct?
That is correct. And in terms of process, the protest follows the first consideration by Planning Commission, and there's not an additional protest period. and the original protest stands through the entire process until the case is considered by governing body. But yes, the original protest happened after the first planning commission when the request contained a request for speakers and outdoor TVs.
Have you heard any feedback this second go around from, I mean, that seemed to be like the main problem was the noise outside, correct?
Correct. At the planning commission, the second time in September, there was some public comment at the planning commission, but it was mainly related to possible impacts of parking issues. I don't believe there was any comments related to the application regarding any noise because that was an amended request and they were no longer going to be doing it.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for staff? I see none. This resides in Councilmember Johnson's district.
Thanks, Mayor. I move that the City Council adopt the findings of the MAPC and approve the requested amendment to CON 2012-00044, authorize the necessary signatures, and instruct the City Clerk to publish the resolution after approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Council member appointments and comments.
Are there any appointments by council members? I see none. We will now move to council member comments. Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to congratulate the Park Department on the great Open Streets event. A lot of people there, a lot of vendors, and it was a great event and a great day. So my wife and I enjoyed it very much.
I will just echo a couple of things. Thank you to the whole community for coming out to multiple different community events this weekend. It was really great to see people together building community, whether at Open Streets, whether outside of New Life Covenant, standing in the gap for foster care children and families, to the Prairie Fire Marathon with over 2,500 participants, and the Wichita Asian Festival on Saturday. Just really grateful to see a lot of community members. And I just want to give a shout out actually to Councilmember Glasscock, who had the fourth Unity in the Community on Friday at Friends University for the West High School football game. And many community members came and gave feedback about what it means to be in a community where we are standing against violence and want to bring community together. So looking forward to more unity in the communities. They have now occurred in districts 1, 3, 4, and 6. And so I encourage council members Johnston and Tuttle to also have unity in the communities, and we will have more of these, including, as Tallgrass Film Festival just mentioned, October 23rd is a free event where we will be showing Wizard of Oz at Nafsker Park, and it's really a free community event for everyone to come out and be part of not just Tallgrass, but be part of the community of Wichita. So thank you to our community. I see no further comments. We do have a motion for an executive session. I move that the City Council recess into executive session at 12 o'clock for 25 minutes. And this is to receive information on a civil action pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2 for legal consultation with the city attorney, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship relating to pending litigation and legal advice. The executive session is required to protect attorney-client privilege and the public interest. The executive session will begin at noon and will end at 12:25 when we will return to the chambers. Motion?
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. We'll return at 12:25.